First scripture reading here comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verses 1 to 15. And for some of you, it may have a musical ring to it. The first part of it might be familiar to you from the Byrds, who sang it as Turn, 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 the first 9 verses, I believe. We are going to go a little bit farther than they did. The writer of Ecclesiastes wrote, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. I perceived whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken away from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away." And also from the scriptures, the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verses 1 to 18. And Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers." This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So Jesus again said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf scatters them or snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father." We are continuing on our message series called Confused. And when I was praying about this, and a number of things happened earlier on in the week, and it reminded me of a question that keeps popping up. What is the purpose of life? And there are many of us that can look at this question, and we have a very good answer for it. We're going to get to that answer shortly. But we live in a day and an age where there are many different messages that are being poured out. We ask the question, and there are many people who are giving different answers. And the question is, which one are we listening to? With a great deal of the tragedy that goes before us, we see a darkness in the world. We see hurt and pain in our broken world that we sometimes struggle with. Now, over the last number of months, a song that keeps coming up into my mind is the song, "The Sound of Silence." And for some of you, you are very familiar with it. It is a Simon and Garfunkel song. There seems to be a theme, the Byrds, Simon and Garfunkel, very similar era. And the song, "The Sound of Silence," that they seem to be suggesting that there is something going on, and that there's a message that's not being spoken, and there's words that aren't being heard, that there is an underlying loneliness at times. Now, as they are suggesting, there have been different people who have redone this song, same lyrics, almost the exact same musical score, slightly different. There's a group called Disturbed, where Simon and Garfunkel nicely suggested they are saying that there is something that we need to listen to, that there is something wrong. For those of you who know the song, you know most of the words. I'm going to try and sing it. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping. And the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In the restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone. Neath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never shared. No one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fool, said I, do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words of the prophet are written on the subway walls, the tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence. We live in a world that is hyper-connected at times. We live in a world where it used to take upwards of a month to send a letter from Canada over to Europe. It could take a few weeks to travel. Take time, but now you can send, if I wanted to, I could text someone over there. I could send an email. It would be there in a matter of seconds. And yet, in our hyperconnectivity, in our time where you can call anyone just about anywhere, I remember my mom wanted me to get a cell phone way back when in university because she kept getting all these phone calls from me. And I said, no, if someone really wants to get a hold of me, they'll find me. Eventually, I have a cell phone. You can get a hold of me just about any time. And yet, in our world today, I wonder if the song, The Sound of Silence, speaks a greater truth than we want to admit. And the verses that are there, talking about people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never shared, no one dared, because it disturbs the sound of silence. Is there messages that are being said that aren't true? Are there messages that are true that aren't being said because we're afraid to say them? We're afraid that we might disturb the status quo. We might undermine the way things are. We might go against the flow. What is the purpose of life? And the question is, according to whom? You may have heard some of these statements. For some people, they hold true. For some, the purpose of life is to do what is right, and that sounds great. We should all do what is right, correct? We should all follow what is right. The only problem is that word, or that phrase, what is right? In our day and age, depending on where you are, depending on what you are doing, what is right keeps changing. Whose rights are you following? And in that problem of what is right, there is confusion. So if the driving force of your life is to do what is right, and people keep saying, well, this is right, and then this is right, but the two things that are said that are right are completely opposite. One is right and one is wrong. Or we end up in a problem, a paradox. For others, it is to do what you want to, or what makes you feel alive. There are a lot of people who would like to do what they want to do. The problem is, if it is just about doing what we want to do, we run into a problem of responsibility. If not for other people, even just for ourselves. Because there are a lot of people that would like to do something that doesn't involve work. And unfortunately, that's not going to make you happy all the time, because eventually you're going to get hungry. And I don't know about you, but I get grouchy when I get hungry. To do what makes you feel alive. But if it's only on that, how long is that going to last? And what happens if your life circumstances change that you can't do that anymore? There is the problem that our lives do change. That our likes and our abilities keep changing. So if it is just based on those things, I'm not saying that these things are bad and can't have a place in our lives, and they should have a place in our lives. Our lives are not to be completely depressed and just doing what we have to do. There needs to be some sort of fun and even passion in our lives. But if this is the end purpose of our lives, we will find that we will end up with problems. Do what makes you happy. That kind of sounds like the previous one. Sometimes what we think will make us happy will make us happy for only a short period of time. But again, if we follow that logic through, eventually we'll get bored with it. or it will run out its course, or we will grow and change, and what makes us happy won't be the same anymore. And again, what makes some people happy is to say what they want to say and to do what they want to do, and yet they find that when they do that, they may find that twinge of happiness for a moment, and then they look at people and they're not happy with them. So then the happiness fades. If our lives are just based on our happiness, the problem is we'll never grow. We will never find a deeper happiness than what we experience today. Buy more. I don't know if anyone's heard of the term retail therapy. The theory is that you'll be happy when you have more stuff. Or if you're feeling bad, go out and buy what you want to buy. Again, there's a problem with this one, is that eventually you run out of A, money, B, space, C, you have no idea what to do with it all. And it creates another stress. And if you run out of money and your whole idea is to be happy through buying stuff, then when you have that great debt, you won't be happy anymore. The other thing is that our economy, which is, we're going to run into problems because it is based on consuming. Eventually, there won't be anything to consume. And we run into a problem. So if our lives are just based on buying more stuff, getting more stuff, once we have all that stuff, and for a time, for some people, it is great. But have you ever bought something that you really wanted to buy? You have it, and you're happy for a little bit. And then you get bored with it. Or it doesn't work the way you want it to. Or it doesn't work as well as the old one that you had that you want to switch back to. There's a problem. To be better, and I encourage us all to be better, to not stay where we are, but to continue to be better. But what? Compared to what? Compared to whom? Is it just about myself? Be better than me? Have you noticed that it's a continued process of growing, and it's good to grow, it's good to continue to strive to be better. But if it is just about being better, will you ever truly be happy? Will you ever truly find that fulfillment? And many times people try to be better compared to their neighbor. Keeping up with the Joneses, or if you don't have Joneses, the Smiths, or the Macintoshes. Keeping up with those around us is a cycle that will never get there. It's kind of like the term, I will be happy when. Have you heard that phrase? I will be happy when, and you substitute your own thing. Whether it's I will be happy when I get married. I will be happy when I have kids. I will be happy when I have my dream job. I will be happy when I graduate school. I will be happy when I have my driver's license. I will be happy when. And it is a continuous cycle that when you get there, you might be happy for a bit, but it's not going to last for all your life. That it is a continuing movement forward, and it's never as satisfying as we thought it would be. That it's almost like we continue to move the bar. I will be happy when, and then you get there, and then I will be happy when, and sometimes we get to that place and you realize I'm just not that happy. We have to be careful what we base our lives on. What is our purpose in life? For some, it is moving up the social ladder. Moving up, become successful and famous. My mind was thinking somewhere else. Successful and famous. I don't know, have any of you gone to the grocery shopping lately? You get to the checkout, and there's all these magazines that have a whole lot of famous people on them. And I saw one about one person is talking about the last 12 years of his marriage being horrible. I've heard statements that people who are famous have made. I have gotten to this point and still wondering, there must be something more. I once thought about going into acting. I don't know whether I would have been a very good actor or not. The thing that I saw is that a whole lot of people weren't happy. There's a whole lot of people that I heard about the drug and alcohol abuse, broken marriages, and I just thought, I don't want to be like that. So if you're climbing the social ladder, what are you climbing to? Now, the more common one is grow up, get a job, get married, and have kids. Seems fairly simple. I encourage the growing up part. I encourage the getting a job part, but you have to be careful there. Are you just looking for your dream job, in which you may or may not find it? Some people are called to be single. So that whole idea of getting married isn't there. Some people aren't able to have children. Some people do not want to have children. So if they're not able to and don't want to, does that mean their lives are any less? No. But if you follow this reasoning, they run into a problem. Through all these, there is a great big but. Because there seems to be something that will counteract or counter it. There seems to be a problem with the ideas, and I believe that we are in what I would call the middle of an ideology war, where there's so many different ideas of what the way things should be that we're fighting against each other. We're creating more and more confusion, and I don't think we're getting that much closer to the truth that God has called us to. And it almost seems that with all these things, there's nothing that is really right. That something will contradict the other. Even when it comes to our following in our faith, there seems to be those who would like to, and I have troubles with what's called the prosperity gospel, name it and claim it. Paul prayed more often than not to have a thorn taken from his side. We don't know what that thorn was. But God said, my grace is sufficient for you. He didn't take it away. So sometimes, even within our Christianity, within our faith, there is struggles of what is right and wrong. And we struggle to see, where do I fit in? What is the purpose of life? How do I live my life according to God's truth? The question keeps coming up. If nothing is right, is life worth living? And I believe that life is worth living. I believe that there is a great truth that we sometimes forget, and that's almost afraid to ask, afraid to speak. Because I believe that life is worth living because of God who has given us life, who shows us his love, and cares for us, that we are never alone. That is a truth that was spoken to me in a very dark time in my life. It's a truth that holds fast to me. And it's not saying that it is the cure-all answer that's going to solve all the world's problems like that. But I believe that it is important to realize the truth that comes through the Bible. That the Bible is inviting us to work through life and reminding us of God's clear presence in this world, even though there are many who would like to say that Jesus was a figment of someone's imagination. That Jesus was just a story to placate people, that Christianity in itself is what they call the opiates of the masses. But we have to realize But Christianity is more than that. Christianity speaks into the reality of our lives. Jesus walked into the reality of our lives. He didn't just stay in heaven. He just didn't look down and give us nice little text messages from his place to our place. He came and walked into the pain, into the suffering, into the hurt, into the loneliness, into the darkness of this world. And it is from this instance that we see the depth of God's love to bring us into a right relationship with us. And we see that even Jesus, who could have lived an easy life, Jesus, who even had struggles, we remember in the Garden of Gethsemane when he is faced with the cross, prays to God that the cup would be passed from him. But God's will be done, and not his. We have a problem when we start having all of the answers to our lives focused on us. Because the answers and the purposes keep changing. And the reality is that we are created to be in relationship, not with just each other, but also with God. We read from the passage from Ecclesiastes where it mentions that we have eternity placed in our hearts. There is a yearning to be with God. And that God's faithfulness in our changing day and our changing hours is unchanging. It meets us where we're at. It can overcome our struggles. It can remind us that we are not alone. That even when we face sickness, we do so with Jesus who goes with us. I think there's also a reality that a lot of the pat answers we used to give, people are starting to ask a little bit deeper questions. I don't know if you remember the joke. It was about a Sunday school teacher who asked the Sunday school class, "Can you tell me what is a little furry animal that has a big fluffy tail?" And the child goes, "I know the right answer is Jesus, but it sure sounds like a squirrel." Sometimes we have all these nice answers, and they seem right, but we're missing the deeper truth to them. Growing up, one of the things looking back, when I was in high school, looking back, going through Sunday school, I knew a lot of the stories. But it wasn't until I was faced with the deeper truths that come from the Bible, that come from Jesus, that come from God, that I saw the depth of God's love for all of us and for myself. The Bible reminds us that there are different seasons in our lives. Sometimes we feel like we're getting overwhelmed by one. Sometimes we feel that we can't make it through. But we sometimes also forget that this is a limited time. But there is a season for all things. That just because we don't like this season doesn't mean that we can't make it through it. We live in a society, I don't know, how many of you remember waiting for a TV show for a week? You kind of have to do it every so often on Netflix. You have to wait till the new episode. Now you can, as they call, binge watching. You can watch as many as you want, as fast as you want. You don't have to wait any longer. How many of you go through the drive-thru at Tim Hortons, and if there's a long lineup, you're frustrated? It used to be you had to wait a long time for the coffee to brew. And now you expect it to be like in your hand as soon as you walk in the door. But we live in a time where we think everything should be coming immediately and that we have trouble being patient at times. We have trouble working through what's happening to us. And it's not everyone, but there is an issue of on demand, right now, how I want it, when I want it. It's almost like they should be reading our minds. But Ecclesiastes reminds us that there is a time and a place for everything, even the things that we don't like. There is a time where there is suffering. There's also a time where there is joy. There is a time where there is embracing. There is a time when we refrain from embracing. There is a time to grow and a time to harvest. And it doesn't always come exactly at the time we want it, does it? I know as a farmer growing up, it frustrated myself and my brothers that my dad would never work on a Sunday. Even if Monday was going to pour and there was a whole field of hay cut. I now have a greater appreciation of my father. He wasn't dictated by what was going to happen on Monday. He had a deeper view of his whole view of eternity, that life just didn't happen on Monday. That we had to do and break who he was so he could get the hay off on Sunday. See, the interesting question that we forget to ask is what kind of person are we going to be? It's not necessarily what we're going to do. What kind of person are we going to be? Are we going to be a person who trusts God even when we are struggling? Just like Job. Job kept asking, why God? God can take the questions, the why gods. I'm sure we all have them at different times in our lives. But when we start focusing on ourselves and we forget to ask God, we take God out of the equation, it becomes very lonely. Now, here's the nice answer that most of us are familiar with. The chief end of humans is to worship God and enjoy Him forever. The question that I have for us, though, is that being seen? Is our lives reflecting our faith? Are people seeing our faith being lived out? Through our choices, through our words, through our actions, through our time on Facebook, on Twitter, on Snapchat, on the hockey rink, on the baseball field? Are people seeing our lives being lived out in our offices, in our schools? This isn't to say that we won't go through suffering, that we won't have bad days, that we won't have struggles, that we won't be hurting, that we won't be asking God, why God? But are we allowing people to see how our faith and how Jesus Christ has changed us, has changed our perspectives? That our faith is not just inside our homes, behind closed doors, behind the doors of the church, but it is every minute of our lives, so that people can see what it means to have faith, to live through times when there is sickness, when there is hurting, but also to live through times where there is joy and rejoicing and praising. Are people seeing how that our faith affects how we live? That when we're faced with the confusion and the confusing messages of this world, that we don't succumb to them. But we still have hope in them. And that Jesus Christ, the hope that Jesus has for us, is living on in us. So will Jesus' light be shining in each of us for others to see? Will people be able to see Christ in us? Or will they just see us? Because when they see Jesus, they know that there's hope. Or they ask, what is that hope? And I believe that we have a responsibility to bring Jesus' hope and love and to his people's lives. To all people's lives. And that is hard, because sometimes we struggle. But Jesus said to go out into all nations, teaching and baptizing, sharing the good news with them. We do that through our words, through our actions, through the way we live. There's a song that I stumbled upon by a group called Wren Collective. It is called Rescuer. There is good news. There is hope. May we have the time to listen, to share, to walk with, that others might see the hope of Jesus Christ. Let us pray. Lord, even in the face of tragedy, we know that you are still present. We don't always understand what is going on. We don't always understand the whys. Lord, help us. Help us to go where you would have us go. Help us to be a light, to be a sign of hope, to be a sign of your love. Lord, we know that your gospel is great, and it is bigger than we many times believe. And sometimes we have trouble communicating those words. Give us the words to speak at the right time and in the right place. Help us to mourn with those who are mourning, to rejoice with those who are rejoicing. But may your hope be the purpose of our lives, leading us forward, guiding us, and encouraging us, because it is by your grace that you have redeemed us, and that we can have hope. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.